5 years after we broke up, I heard Paul was getting married. So, I flew back home, relieved. But the moment I landed, he cornered me against a wall at the airport. "Fake news," he said. "Just to reel you in. But I'm already married." I shot back, flashing a diamond ring to bluff my way out. He stared at the ring, then let out a low chuckle. "Then the three of us can be together." Paul was getting married. When I heard the news, I was so happy I stayed up all night, immediately booking a flight back home. Boo-hoo, I'm finally back. The second I got off the plane, I called my best friend, sobbing about how sad American desk lunches are not fit for human consumption while rattling off a list of food I was craving. Spicy crawfish, barbecue, hot pot, snail noodles, malatang, boba tea. Just as I was excitedly telling my friend, "This time, I'm taking back all the food that's rightfully mine," a hand grabbed my wrist, and the next thing I knew, I was pinned against a wall. My phone clattered to the floor. I looked at the man in front of me, a good head taller, with a cool, noble air, striking features, and a face so handsome it was almost demonic. My mind went completely blank. Just then, my best friend's anxious voice came through the phone, "Lily, stop listing food. That news about Paul getting married is fake. Run. Couldn't you have told me that before I walked into the lion's den?" Ugh. I wanted to run, but Paul's grip was surprisingly strong. He wasn't using much force, yet I couldn't break free. So I could only make myself small, keeping my head down and not daring to speak. I secretly glanced around, looking for an escape route. After all, when we broke up, Paul had sworn that if he ever saw me again, he'd kill me. I'd finally made it back home, and I hadn't even had a bite of the food I'd been dreaming of for 5 years. I didn't want to die. Nothing to say to me? Seeing my silence, Paul lifted my chin, forcing me to look him in the eye. I was forced to meet his gaze. When I looked into his deep, beautiful, almond-shaped eyes, which were now glistening with unshed tears, my heart clenched, and a bitter taste filled my throat. I fought back the tears, turned my face away, and said in a cold, hard voice, "No." With that, I struggled again to push him away. "No?" Paul tightened his grip, his voice hoarse and tinged with a barely perceptible sob. "You're heartless." Then, ignoring the crowd of people coming and going, he cupped my chin and kissed me. The moment our lips touched, my eyes flew open in shock. Paul's kiss wasn't gentle. It was punishing, vengeful, and I couldn't escape. My tongue went numb from the intensity. Herbertrius, I suddenly spotted someone nearby pulling out their phone, probably to take a picture. Almost as a reflex, I bit him. Caught off guard, his lips started to bleed, and he froze for a second in surprise. In that instant, I shoved him away and slapped him across the face. "Are you crazy?" I glared at him, reminding him, "You're about to get married." I'd put a lot of force into that slap, and his head snapped to the side. He poked his cheek with his tongue, touched the side of his face, then pressed a finger to his bleeding lip and let out a soft, low laugh. "That was just fake news to lure you back." I was completely floored. It was really fake news? Then what did that make me? A moth flying straight into a flame? I was so stunned that I didn't notice the flicker of satisfaction and even pleasure in his eyes after I slapped him. By the time I snapped out of it, Paul was holding my hand, kissing my palm tenderly and asking if it hurt. I hit him, and he's asking if my hand hurts? Something feels really off here. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. All I could think about was not repeating the disaster from 5 years ago. In a flash of inspiration, I saw the diamond ring on my left hand. I composed myself and said again, "But I'm married." The air instantly froze. Paul's eyes dropped to the diamond ring on my hand, and he fell silent. As his stare sent a chill down my spine, he suddenly let out a low laugh. "Then the three of us can be together," he said calmly, as if suggesting a perfectly reasonable plan. I was so shocked I nearly bit my tongue. "Are you insane? What does he mean, the three of us? Does he have any idea what he's saying?" While I was still in shock, Paul had already swept me off my feet and thrown me over his shoulder. Paul tossed me into the back of his Maybach and told the driver to go. "Paul, this is kidnapping." Seeing him raise the partition, I panicked even more. I didn't care that the car was already moving. I turned and pulled the door handle, trying to jump out. But Paul was quicker, grabbing my wrist and pulling me back. The car screeched to a halt. Inertia sent me flying forward, and just as I was about to hit the partition, Paul yanked me back into his arms. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Paul held me tight, his arms trembling slightly with lingering fear. The warm, familiar embrace made me lose myself for a second. Memories of the past flooded my mind, but they were quickly followed by the memory of his mother's words. I closed my eyes, suppressed all the emotions welling up inside me, took a deep breath, and pushed Paul away with all my might. I slid to the farthest corner of the seat and stabbed him with my words. "Don't hold me so tight. My husband will get jealous." As I spoke, I deliberately flashed the diamond ring on my hand. A flicker of fury crossed Paul's eyes when he saw the ring, but it was gone so fast I thought I might have imagined it. "Where's he from?" Paul took an iced beer from the car fridge, opened it, and chugged it down before asking casually, as if making small talk. "What?" I didn't follow. "I'm asking where your husband is from," Paul said, crushing the beer can in his hand. "Oh, right," I said, my mind racing. "He's French." Nice. How old is he?" Paul casually took off the prayer beads from his wrist and started rolling them between his fingers as he asked. 29, I replied, a bit distracted. Was I seeing things just now? Did I just see a bunch of scars on Paul's wrist? Is he in good shape? Height and weight? Paul asked again. My thoughts snapped back to the present. He's in great shape. 6 feet tall, about 165 pounds. I was still a little dazed and didn't notice the increasing speed of Paul's questions. How did you two meet? He pressed on. My mind spun. After a few seconds, I continued my fabricated story. He lost his wallet, and I lent him some money, and then. Before I could finish, Paul cut me off again. What about his family? He has a mom and dad, and a younger sister. My answers started to stutter. Paul's intense questioning was making me genuinely nervous. He fired off another 7 or 8 questions, like what's his favorite food? Where was your first date? What movie did you see? Where do you like to hang out? What are his hobbies, and what's his favorite position? His questions got more and more pointed. Just as I was getting increasingly flustered, I heard him ask again, how old is he? 28. I blurted out. Height and weight? He asked, his words coming at a rapid-fire pace. 6'1". 155 pounds. As the words left my mouth, I saw Paul's fingers freeze on his prayer beads. He let out a low chuckle and raised an eyebrow. Not bad. Something doesn't feel right. While I was trying to figure it out, Paul gently took my hand, slipped off my ring, and in a flash, replaced it with a cushion-cut pink diamond that looked to be at least 10 carats. Before I could even react, Paul had rolled down the window and tossed my old ring out. My ring. I cried out in pain. It might have only been 15 grand, but that was still money. I instinctively lunged forward to try and save it, but it was too late. Throwing yourself at me? Paul pulled me into his arms, a smile playing on his lips as I fell into his lap trying to rescue the ring. He looked at the new pink diamond on my finger with satisfaction. Looks good. Wear this for now. I'll get you a bigger one at the next auction. Is he for real? I recognized this diamond. It was auctioned in Hong Kong 3 years ago and sold to a mysterious buyer for a staggering 70 million. It made headlines because of the sky-high price, which is how I'd seen it. I never imagined Paul was the buyer, and I certainly never imagined he'd tell me to just wear a $70 million diamond for now. Paul forcibly took me back to the Royal View Estates. This was where we lived together back when we were a couple. The moment I stepped into the villa, 3 years of memories came rushing back like a tidal wave. We were young and reckless then, and we had made out in practically every corner of this house. Thinking about those wild, carefree moments made my face flush beet red. "What do you want to eat?" Paul took off his suit jacket, bent down to get a pair of pink bunny slippers from the shoe cabinet, and knelt on one knee to put them on my feet. Then he changed into a pair of gray wolf slippers for himself. I recognized them. They were the matching couple's slippers we had bought at the supermarket together. It's been 5 years, and they're still here. Only mine were perfectly preserved, looking almost new. His, on the other hand, looked old and worn, proof that someone had been wearing them for the past 5 years. My eyes started to burn, and a lump formed in my throat. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Paul washed his hands, then patted my head and led me to the sink to wash my hands. He washed them meticulously, just like he used to when we were still together. My eyes stung even more. I reminded him, "Paul, we already broke up." I pulled my hand back, hiding it behind my back so he couldn't touch it. "Spicy crawfish for dinner?" Paul grabbed a few paper towels, walked behind me to dry my hands, and asked as if he hadn't heard me at all. "You just got off a long flight, so you shouldn't eat anything too spicy. I'll make you some crawfish tonight, along with a few of your other favorite dishes. We'll do barbecue, hot pot, and malatang tomorrow." As he spoke, he tied on a pink apron, another thing I'd bought. I deliberately chose my favorite color, pink, even though Paul never once let me cook. The memories of our past, like a floodgate breaking open, poured into my mind. Tears I could no longer control streamed down my face, and I turned to leave. But Paul was faster. He caught me, lifted me onto the dining table, and trapped me there. "Don't want crawfish? How about hot pot? Or snail noodles?" Paul gently wiped my tears away, but they just kept coming. "I want to leave," I said coldly, turning my face away so he couldn't wipe my tears anymore. "Not a chance." "Unless I'm dead," Paul said, his tone unchanging, but I could tell he was serious. But we were destined to be apart. I looked at Paul and stabbed him with my words, one by one. "Didn't you ask me what my favorite position with my husband is? I'll tell you right now. I love being on top, MMPH. I was trying to make him angry enough to throw me out, but before I could finish, Paul grabbed the back of my head and kissed me. The kiss was sudden and fierce, even more intense than the one at the airport, as if he was trying to prove something. I was being plundered, so breathless I could barely think. Just as he loosened his grip slightly to let me breathe, I seized the opportunity. I pushed him away and slapped him again. This time, I used all my strength, and my fingertips went numb. A red handprint quickly appeared on Paul's face, a shocking sight. But he showed no anger at all. He took my hand, kissed my reddening fingertips tenderly, and praised me, "Baby, you've got a strong hand." I watched as Paul got some ointment and carefully applied it to my fingers. He's completely lost his mind, I thought. Paul kept me prisoner in the villa, confiscating all my devices. I tried everything I could think of, but he wouldn't let me leave. So, I went on a hunger strike. I took the elaborate meals he cooked for me and dumped them in the trash right in front of him. He tried to have someone give me nutrients through and for, but that only led to me hurting myself. So, he relented. Except, if I didn't eat, he wouldn't eat either. "It's fine. If we can't share a bed in life, we'll share a coffin in death," Paul said calmly, using a warm towel to wipe my hands, which had gotten dirty from throwing the food away. He told me he had it all arranged. "You're insane." I was too hungry to have the energy to argue with him. I pushed him away and went straight upstairs to bed. A little while later, Paul came upstairs too. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin in the crook of my neck. I was too weak from hunger to bother with him and drifted off into a hazy sleep. I woke up at 3 in the morning, starved. When I opened my eyes, Paul wasn't beside me. I listened carefully. He wasn't in the bathroom either. A jolt of excitement shot through me. I quickly got up, but after 3 days without food, I was incredibly weak. As my vision swam with black spots, I saw a chocolate bar on the nightstand. Without a second thought, I tore open the wrapper and stuffed it into my mouth, simultaneously tiptoeing out of the room. The villa was quiet, with just me and Paul inside. I carefully made my way towards the study. I remembered there was a spare key in there. When I reached the study door, I found it was slightly ajar. Paul was inside. My heart sank. There was no way I could sneak in and grab the spare key now. Just as I was about to turn back to the bedroom, I heard a faint sound from inside the study. I instinctively glanced back and saw Paul inside, holding a dagger and cutting his own wrist. "What are you doing?" Without thinking, I rushed in and snatched the dagger from his hand. At the same time, I saw his blood-drenched arm. Seeing this, I felt the blood drain from my face. In a flash, I remembered the scars I'd glimpsed on his wrist in the car a few days ago. So this is how he got them? Paul reacted quickly. The moment he saw me, he pulled down his sleeve to hide the wound. "You're still bleeding." Seeing how little he cared for his own body, I panicked and turned to get the first aid kit, but he grabbed me and pulled me back. "Worried about me?" Paul lifted me onto the desk with one arm, his strong waist pressing firmly between my legs, trapping me in an intimate position. "Paul." The position was far too intimate. Through our thin clothes, I could feel the heat of his body against my inner thighs. My face instantly turned red, but I still insisted on getting down to get the first aid kit to stop the bleeding. I'm listening." Paul's voice was lazy and slightly hoarse. The way he drew out the last syllable was inexplicably seductive. My ears burned even hotter. I took a deep breath and tried to reason with him patiently. "Let me down. I'll get the first aid kit and stop the bleeding." Hearing this, Paul cupped my face, his eyes sparkling and a smile he couldn't suppress spreading across his lips. "See? You do still care about me. You do still love me." "Me, is that really the point right now?" Seeing that I was genuinely getting angry, Paul got serious. "I'm not hurting myself," he said earnestly. "The doctor said I need to bleed myself regularly, or I'll explode." I've never heard anything so ridiculous. I couldn't help it. "Paul, do you take me for an idiot?" At my words, Paul chuckled softly. "I'm serious, honey. Didn't you always used to say I was like a human-shaped teddy bear? Well, your little teddy bear has been cooped up for 5 years. If I don't let some blood out, I'm gonna break." Unless, Paul looked at me, his gaze so intense it felt like he wanted to devour me whole. "I don't let out blood, but something else?" For a moment, I didn't get what he meant, until he pushed me down onto the desk and kissed me. Instantly, the memories of us fooling around on this very desk flooded my mind. I shoved Paul away and fled in terror. Behind me, I heard his wild, unrestrained, yet helpless laughter. "Run slowly." Paul no longer restricted my freedom, but he followed me everywhere I went. "I have to use the bathroom." I finally snapped when he tried to follow me into the restroom. You go," Paul said, his tall frame blocking the door, fully prepared to watch me finish. I looked at his shameless expression, took a deep breath, and realized that my plan to escape under the guise of a class reunion was now more critical than ever. "Paul." I tried to suppress my temper, but it boiled over anyway, and I gritted my teeth in frustration. Seeing I was genuinely angry, Paul stopped teasing me. He smiled, patted my head, and said, "All right, I'll wait for you at the door." The thunderous slam of the door was my only reply. Paul rubbed his prominent nose, which had nearly been hit by the door, bent his long legs, and leaned against the wall to wait for me. 10 minutes later, I came out. "Was it a productive trip, honey? Did you wash your hands? Want me to wash them for you?" The moment I opened the door with a blank expression, Paul was right there, chattering away. "Paul." My face flushed with anger. Even though we had been intimate countless times, I still couldn't discuss the success of my bathroom trips with a straight face. Okay, don't be angry. I won't ask any more. Seeing I was truly furious, Paul zipped his lips and finally shut up. 3 days later was the class reunion. I looked at the man who insisted on wearing a matching outfit with me, preening like a peacock, closed my eyes, and tried to hypnotize myself. You chose this man. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. Anger is bad for your health. The reunion was held at the biggest hotel in Beijing. Along the way, Paul stuck to me like glue. It wasn't until we were about to enter the private room that he got a call. The caller ID read, Mrs. Herbert. Paul's mother's surname was Herbert. The moment he saw the caller ID, a wave of irritation washed over Paul's face, and he instinctively hung up. But the moment he did, the person called right back. Just as Paul was about to turn off his phone, I stopped him. They're calling so persistently, it might be urgent. You should take it. You can find me after, I said, forcing a rare, gentle smile for him. Paul ignored the vibrating phone and just stared at me, at my earnest face that was trying a little too hard to look calm. A few seconds later, a faint smile touched his lips. Okay, I'll take the call. You go on in. Okay. Paul's sudden compliance made it hard for me to contain my excitement, but he quickly poured cold water on it. Honey, I'll just be right here at the door. I promise you'll see me the second you step out, he said, the curve of his lips widening. My plan to sneak away while he was distracted went up in smoke. That jerk. He's calling my bluff. I snatched my purse from his hand, stormed into the private room without another glance at him. If I can't get out the door, there has to be a window, right? But Paul had anticipated my move again. He added from behind me, Honey, this is the 19th floor. If you open a window for some air, be careful not to climb down the drainpipe. It's really dangerous. I hadn't been to a class reunion since graduation, which was 6 years ago. A lot of people showed up today, but most had changed so much that when I first entered the room, I hardly recognized anyone. But my reason for coming today wasn't to reminisce anyway, so I didn't care if I knew them or not. I grabbed a small piece of cake and sat down in a corner to eat. Paul had given me a headache, and I needed something sweet to calm down. Just as I was venting my frustration by stabbing at the cake with my fork and plotting my escape, a snide voice piped up beside me. Well, if it isn't Lily. I instinctively turned around and saw Jessica, surrounded by a few other girls. Back in school, Jessica and I came from similar backgrounds. Then, the school forum held a campus beauty poll, and for some reason, I won, and Jessica lost. Because of that, she was always secretly trying to make trouble for me, though she never succeeded. Later, when I started dating Paul, she completely lost it, running up to me and demanding to know if I had to steal everything she liked. I was completely baffled by her question and didn't hesitate to shut her down. From then on, we were mortal enemies. Later, when my family went bankrupt and I broke up with Paul, she was apparently so thrilled that she threw a party at her house to celebrate and searched all over the city for me, hoping to gloat. But I didn't care about any of that. My goal today wasn't to catch up. Especially not with her. So, I didn't respond. Seeing me ignore her, Jessica didn't get angry. Instead, she seemed to relish the feeling of finally having one-upped me. She pulled out her phone, tapped it a few times, and shoved it in my face with a gloating tone. Did you know Paul's getting married? Jessica's voice was loud, drawing everyone's attention. Almost everyone in the room gathered around. A few classmates wanted to speak up for me, but after a glance at Jessica, they hesitated and said nothing. On Jessica's phone was a clarification statement issued by the He Corporation. The statement debunked the rumors that Paul was going to marry the daughter of the Wilson family, calling them baseless. He himself had retweeted the statement with the caption, I have a fiancé I've been in love with for years. We are in a stable relationship and will be getting married soon. I was a little taken aback when I saw the statement. Seeing my frown, just as she'd hoped, Jessica practically beamed. She said triumphantly, see? Paul's getting married soon. In response, I just gave a faint oh. And with that, Jessica lost her composure. Oh. That's all you have to say is, oh? Jessica was incredulous. What else? Should I have a meltdown like you? I couldn't be bothered with her and turned to leave. Since Jessica didn't get to see me break down, she obviously wasn't going to let me go that easily. Seeing that I was really leaving, she panicked, rushed forward, and grabbed my arm to stop me. But she used too much force and ended up scratching her hand on my diamond ring. Getting scratched only made Jessica angrier. She pointed at me furiously, "Lily, are you still wearing fake diamonds?" Hearing this, I raised my hand to look at the dazzling diamond on my finger and said, exasperated, "It's real." When I said the ring was real, Jessica burst out laughing as if she'd heard the funniest joke in the world. "Seriously, Lily? You're that desperate for attention now? Real? Your family is broke, how could you afford something real? This is the pink star, it's worth $60 or $70 million. Jessica's little clique started laughing too. One of them, a girl named Lauren, looked at me with contempt. "Real? How could you possibly afford that? Did you get picked up by some old rich guy?" Faced with Lauren's malicious slander, I scoffed. "If you've got nothing better to do with your mouth, go lick a toilet. Don't stand here spewing crap. Just because you're a maggot, does that mean you think the whole world is a cesspool?" At my words, Lauren's face turned shades of red and white, as if I'd hit a nerve. But she didn't dare lay a hand on me because she'd once seen me beat up a group of thugs until they couldn't get up. So, even though she was so angry her chest was heaving, she could only bottle it up. Just then, someone nearby whispered that they'd seen Lauren checking into a hotel with an old man a few days ago. "You bitch, what nonsense are you spouting?" Lauren, as if finding an outlet for her anger, lunged at the person and started fighting. In an instant, the whole room descended into chaos. Then, someone shouted, "Mr. He is here." And the room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the door. The crowd parted automatically, and Paul walked in, hands in his pockets, with a leisurely gait. "What's going on here?" Paul asked casually. But as he asked, his eyes were on me. When he saw that I was okay, his brow relaxed imperceptibly. Hearing Paul's question, Jessica immediately rushed up to him eagerly, pointing at me and mocking loudly. "We were just talking about how Lily is being kept by some 80-year-old man who even bought her a diamond ring." Paul looked baffled for a moment. He pointed to himself and asked, "An 80-year-old man? Me?" As he spoke, he even took out his phone to look at his reflection, muttering, "No way, I take such good care of myself, do I still look old? I'm only a year older than Lily." Jessica was stunned, seemingly not understanding what Paul was saying. But fearing a misunderstanding, she quickly explained, "We're not saying you're old, we're talking about the old man who gave Lily the ring. We're saying he's old." Hearing this, I pressed my lips together tightly, trying my best not to laugh. After hearing Jessica's explanation, Paul was silent for a few seconds, then walked over and wrapped his arm around my waist. "Honey, let's go. I think she's got a screw loose. I don't know if that's contagious, let's get out of here." Seeing Paul call me honey and intimately wrap his arm around me to leave, Jessica blurted out, "Mr. He, didn't you issue a statement saying you have a fiancé? Why are you calling Lily honey? Is she the other woman?" At Jessica's words, Paul stopped in his tracks. His eyes turned ice cold, and he shot a chilling glare at her that made her stumble back several steps. "Did you lose some brain cells scrolling on Temu? Was I not clear enough? I gave her the ring. And the fiancé in my statement, the one I'm about to marry, is Lily. Got it?" Being publicly called brainless so ruthlessly, Jessica's face flushed crimson. But she wasn't ready to give up. "But," she said timidly, "didn't you dump her 5 years ago?" At the mention of 5 years ago, a flicker of loneliness and sadness crossed Paul's eyes, but it was gone in an instant. He returned to his cool, noble self. "A correction, 5 years ago, Lily dumped me." Jessica was dumbfounded. She murmured, "She dumped you and you're still getting back together with her?" Paul was defiant. "Yeah, so what? Just then, besides the chorus of compliments about us being a match made in heaven, someone in the crowd muttered, "Why does Mr. He seem like such a simp for Lily?" Hearing this, Paul looked at the person and argued loudly, "What do you know? A simp who simps to the end gets everything. Didn't you see? I'm even wearing a matching outfit with Lily. You know what that means? It means my simping is about to pay off." In the end, I had to physically drag Paul away, or he would have kept showing off for the next 3 days and nights. Before we went to sleep that night, Paul suddenly blurted out, "There's a chill in the air. Time to bankrupt the Zhaos." I was almost asleep but couldn't help but let out a chuckle. Facing away from him, I mumbled dismissively, "Go to sleep. Honey." As I finished speaking, Paul wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin in the crook of my neck. He asked tentatively, "Can we go get our marriage license tomorrow? Otherwise, they'll keep making fun of me for being a simp." He sounded so pitiful, like a little puppy. But I was instantly wide awake. "Paul, if you knew why I broke up with you 5 years ago, would you still want to get married?" At that moment, I suddenly couldn't face him. I could only pretend to be asleep. Paul knew I was faking, but he didn't say anything. He just sighed softly and held me tighter. "All right then. I'll just have to keep on simping. I'm sure I'll win you over eventually." Listening to Paul's self-pep talk, my heart ached so much I wanted to cry. Paul continued to stick to me like glue. To do so, he started working from home. "Isn't your company going to go bankrupt like this?" I finally couldn't help but ask after he'd been working from home for half a month. "Of course not. You have to believe in your husband's abilities," Paul said, leaning back in the large office chair in the study and giving me a playful, cocky wink. After nearly a month of working from home, a major multinational merger and acquisition project reached a critical stage, requiring him, the decision-maker, to personally attend an in-person signing ceremony that couldn't be handled remotely. He wanted to take me to the company with him, but I was afraid his mother, Mrs. Herbert, would find out I was back in Beijing, so I refused. My reaction was so strong that Paul didn't push it. But before he left, he cupped my face and asked me seriously, "Honey, will you still be here when I get back?" Looking at the insecure Paul, my eyes welled up, and a lump formed in my throat. I didn't answer, but Paul waited, stubbornly needing my answer. "Yes," I finally whispered, lowering my gaze. "Good. I trust you," Paul said, kissing my forehead. He pulled me into a deep, long hug before finally letting go and getting into the car. I stood in the yard, watching his car drive away. By the time I snapped back to reality, my face was covered in tears. Fearing that Paul might turn back, I quickly wiped my tears and went straight upstairs to pack. To make a quick getaway, I didn't take the suitcase I'd brought back with me, only packing my documents to take. But when I opened the bag hidden in the closet, I froze. Where were all my documents? I turned the bag inside out and searched it 3 times, but found nothing. I even turned the entire room upside down, but still couldn't find them. But I was sure they were in the bag when I checked last night before bed. In that instant, it hit me, Paul took them. Realizing this, I didn't care about anything else. I grabbed my phone and rushed downstairs. Documents could be replaced. The priority was to get out of here. But as I hurriedly opened the door to leave, I saw someone I never expected. It was Mrs. Herbert. She was as elegant and regal as ever, her gaze towards me filled with coldness and contempt. She said, "Let's talk." An hour later, I was on Mrs. Herbert's private jet, flying to the UK. From thousands of feet in the air, Beijing was no longer visible. I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and tears streamed down my face. This time, I probably won't be coming back. I'm sorry, Paul. I have to break my promise again. I returned to the place I had been living in the UK. After opening the door, I didn't even have the energy to turn on the lights. I fumbled my way back to my room and collapsed onto the bed. I slept fitfully, trapped in a series of nightmares. They were all about Paul. There was the scene from 5 years ago when we broke up, where he threatened to kill me if he ever saw me again, only to immediately get on his knees and beg me to take him back. There was the scene in the study, where he was cutting his own wrist with a knife. There was the scene at the class reunion, where he proudly declared himself a simp. And finally, there was the scene before he left for the office, asking me if I would still be there when he got back. These images intertwined, forming a massive net that enveloped me, suffocating me until I could barely breathe. I was drowning in these nightmares, unable to escape, just like I had been for the past 5 years. Until I was woken up by the doorbell. When I woke up, I was still dazed, unable to distinguish between dream and reality. My eyes were swollen from crying, sore and heavy. My head was fuzzy, and my whole body felt like it was filled with lead. I sat on the bed for a while before getting up to open the door. Perhaps the constant nightmares had muddled my brain, because I opened the door without even checking who was outside. The moment I opened the door, my mind went blank. Because standing outside was Paul. He was still wearing the same suit he'd had on before he left, but it was no longer crisp, but wrinkled and rumpled. His slicked back hair was a mess. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His beautiful almond-shaped eyes were bloodshot, with faint dark circles underneath. He had lost his usual cool, noble demeanor and looked somewhat disheveled. Seeing that I was safe, Paul let out a sigh of relief. He stared at me intently, his eyes turning red as he ground out my name through clenched teeth. Lily, you little liar. The tears I'd been holding back started to fall in large drops the moment he said my name. Crying won't help. This time, I won't forgive you so easily. Seeing me cry, Paul's expression softened, but he continued his tough talk. But he stopped mid-sentence. Because I had thrown myself into his arms, hugging him tightly and sobbing uncontrollably. All right, don't cry. I was just trying to scare you. I won't really hurt you. Paul's voice softened again and again as he tried to comfort me. But the more he comforted me, the sadder I became, and the harder I cried. I ended up crying so much I started to hyperventilate. 5 minutes later, I took the plastic bag off my face, sniffled, and felt a little embarrassed. Feeling guilty now? Paul pinched my cheek, not unkindly, but his jaw was tight. Lily, I should just chain you to my belt loop and take you everywhere with me. That's the only way to be sure you won't run off the second I look away. I looked down, too guilty to talk back. Just then, my doorbell rang again. To ease the awkwardness, I went to open it. The moment the door opened, a blonde, blue-eyed man with chiseled features pulled me into a surprisingly enthusiastic and massive hug. Hey, Lily, you're finally back. I missed you like crazy these past few months. Before I could react, an explosive, broken roar came from behind me. Lily. 2 minutes later, after I finally managed to send the talkative George on his way, I turned around to see Paul with a look of deep contemplation. He crossed his arms, his face serious. I will not be the other man. That's my bottom line. What is he talking about? Paul shamelessly stayed, and I didn't stop him, cherishing this last bit of time together. Because I knew that as soon as Mrs. Herbert found out Paul was here with me, she would send me away again. I just didn't expect that day to come so soon. One day, Paul got a call saying there was a problem at the UK branch office that he needed to go check on. He hadn't been gone for 5 minutes when the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Mrs. Herbert standing outside. Aren't you going to invite me in? Seeing my silence, Mrs. Herbert remained as poised and elegant as ever, a graceful smile on her face. Please, come in, I said, pursing my lips and stepping aside to let her in. Out of courtesy, I poured her a cup of coffee. It's been 5 years. Your seduction skills have certainly improved. No wonder you were able to charm my son into chasing you across the world. Mrs. Herbert's smile was radiant, but her words were laced with acid. Seeing my silence, she gracefully lifted the coffee cup, took a sip, and then frowned, setting the cup down with a disdainful thud. She sneered, truly something that can't be presented in high society. She was ostensibly talking about the coffee, but she was really talking about me. Paul bought these coffee beans. They cost a fortune per gram. How could they not be high-end? I took a deep breath, pushing down my thoughts. Mrs. Herbert, I explained, this time was an accident. At this, Mrs. Herbert scoffed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. An accident? Or was it you, the little vixen, seducing my son? Such fine upbringing. Mrs. Herbert's ugly words echoed in the living room. Before I could react, a cold voice came unexpectedly from the entryway. You have no right to comment on her upbringing. Mrs. Herbert and I both turned to see Paul, who was supposed to be at the office. His handsome, almost demonic face was expressionless, his eyes as dark as a bottomless, cold abyss. He walked towards us, his gaze sweeping over us before finally landing on my eyes, which were slightly red from anger and humiliation. Paul pursed his lips, walked over, and took my hand. Then he turned to Mrs. Herbert, his eyes icy and devoid of warmth. I made myself very clear on the phone 2 weeks ago. I told you to stop interfering in my life. Hearing Paul's words, Mrs. Herbert's well-maintained, slightly flustered face instantly flushed with anger. I'm your mother. She snapped. Paul sneered, his brow filled with mockery. You remember you're my mother now? Have you fulfilled a single day of your motherly duties since I was a child? If not, what right do you have to interfere in my life? He raised my hand, our fingers intertwined, his cool voice carrying a chilling frost. Especially her. What right do you have to criticize her? Being so mercilessly put down by Paul, Mrs. Herbert's face contorted with rage. She pointed at me, her voice sharp and distorted with anger. You're defending her like this? Paul's face was calm as he used our clasped hands to show his unwavering stance. The sight of this only fueled Mrs. Herbert's fury. Do you know why she broke up with you 5 years ago? Mrs. Herbert pointed at me and shrieked at Paul. At her words, my breath caught in my throat. My hand trembled imperceptibly, and I couldn't look at Paul. I wanted to pull my hand from his. The thought of Paul's reaction when he found out the truth brought tears to the brink of spilling over. Seeing my reaction, Mrs. Herbert let out a satisfied, cold laugh. But in the next second, her smile froze. Because Paul said calmly, I know. At his words, I snapped my head up to look at him. He knew. He knew why I left 5 years ago. Mrs. Herbert was stunned. You know? Yes, I know. Paul's tone was flat. You know she took $500,000 from me and dumped you? Mrs. Herbert's voice shot up, sharp and piercing. Paul just hummed in agreement. Mrs. Herbert deflated like a popped balloon. You were in such a difficult place back then, she asked in disbelief, and she abandoned you for money, and you still love her? Paul ignored her attempts to drive a wedge between us. His grip on my hand didn't loosen in the slightest, giving me no chance to pull away. Why don't you tell the whole story? Paul looked at Mrs. Herbert with cold eyes. You knew I was in a difficult place back then. So why did you have to force the person I love most to leave at that exact moment? What nonsense are you talking about? Mrs. Herbert's eyes darted around, and she stammered, unable to meet Paul's gaze. Paul scoffed. You think I didn't know you threatened Lily, that if she didn't take the money and leave, you would go after her parents? You think I didn't know you told her I needed a wife from a good family who could help my career, not a bankrupt, fallen socialite like her? I didn't say anything to leave a little dignity for our mother-son relationship. 5 years ago, when my father had just passed away and the company was in turmoil, when I was all alone, you didn't think to help me. Instead, you forced away the person I love most and teamed up with your brother to try and kick me out of the He Corporation. Do you think anything you've done qualifies you to be called a mother? Paul's words were like daggers, ruthlessly piercing the carefully constructed image of a loving mother that Mrs. Herbert had maintained. Her well-preserved face instantly flushed a deep red. Watching Paul calmly state all this, an indescribable heartache surged from the depths of my soul, and my eyes instantly reddened. So that's how hard it was for him back then. I thought of the day we broke up, of him kneeling in the rain, begging me not to leave. The pain in my chest was so intense I could barely breathe, and tears flowed uncontrollably. How devastated he must have been back then, losing his father, being betrayed by his family, and abandoned by the person he loved. No, I didn't. You can't say that about me. Hearing Paul's words, Mrs. Herbert was still trying to argue. Your uncle is my brother, would he harm you? He was just worried you were young and foolish, he wanted to help you. You can tell yourself those lies, but don't expect me to believe them. Paul's voice was merciless, cold, and sharp. I'm warning you one last time. Don't show your face in front of her again, and don't try anything with her or anyone around her. Otherwise, I won't hesitate to send you and your brother to prison together. You know I'm capable of it. As his last words fell, a deathly silence filled the living room. Even the air seemed to freeze. Mrs. Herbert staggered back a step. She seemed unable to believe what she had just heard, her lips trembling as she pointed at Paul, her eyes filled with a murderous venom. You ungrateful son. You can go to hell with this jinx. You'll regret this sooner or later. Mrs. Herbert cursed viciously. She used the most venomous words to curse her own son. But Paul acted as if he hadn't heard a thing. He just said calmly, by the way, since you love sending people abroad so much, why don't you stay abroad yourself? With that, he signaled for the bodyguards who were already waiting outside to escort her out. Mrs. Herbert's curses faded into the distance. Only Paul and I were left in the living room. For a moment, the atmosphere was terrifyingly quiet. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Paul said, his voice back to its usual gentleness. He tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, all the hostility in him gone. But his gentle tone only made my tears fall faster. A lump in my throat kept me from speaking. After a long moment, I finally choked out, when did you find all this out? At my question, Paul's hand, which was wiping my tears, paused. Right before I used that fake news to lure you back home. Hearing his words, everything clicked into place in my mind. Back then, Mrs. Herbert had used $500,000 to force me to leave Beijing. She demanded that I not return until Paul was married, or she would make my parents disappear from the face of the earth. Later, under her arrangements, I went abroad. She would periodically send people to move me to a new place, which is why Paul couldn't find me for 5 years. No wonder Paul said what he did at the airport that day. He knew all along. Realizing this, I suddenly didn't know how to face him. Seeing my sudden silence, Paul changed the subject. His voice was slightly hoarse, tinged with a bit of helplessness. Why did you just stand there and let her insult you? Where's all that fire you show me? You little rascal, you only pick on me, don't you? Paul seemed to work himself up into a huff. He lifted my chin and bit my lip punishingly. Next time, I don't care who makes you unhappy or uncomfortable, you fight back, you hear me? I've got your back. His words made the tears I had just suppressed burst forth again. This kind of unconditional devotion was truly intoxicating. Don't cry, Paul said, his heart aching as he wiped away my tears with his thumb. His gaze was heavy, and his Adam's apple bobbed. Baby, when you cry like that, it makes me so damn horny. My tears stopped instantly. My eyes widened in disbelief as I stared at him. How could he say something so outrageous with such a straight face? Is that even allowed? Seeing my shocked, stunned expression, Paul let out a low, pleased chuckle. All right, don't be angry, he cooed. Pack your things. We're going home. Okay, wait a minute, I need to go say goodbye to George, I said, snatching the tissue from his hand to wipe my own tears, sniffling as I prepared to go next door. Hearing this, Paul instantly became alert. I'll go with you. I looked at Paul, dressed in his impeccably tailored suit, exuding an air of cool, ascetic charm, and hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea. You're exactly his type. On our wedding day, Paul was as triumphant as a victorious general. No matter who came to toast him, as long as they said wishing you 100 years of happiness or may you be together forever, he would down the drink without hesitation. So, by the time the banquet was over, he was completely drunk. We'll get going then, Lily, said one of Paul's childhood friends after helping him back to the room. Okay, thank you for all your help today, I replied with a polite nod. Just after I saw them off, I noticed one of them had left their phone behind. Without thinking, I opened the door to return it to them. But as soon as I opened the door, I heard them chatting. Well, Paul finally got his happy ending after all this time. You can say that again. That time 2 years ago was terrifying. Paul swallowed a whole bottle of pills. He almost didn't make it. I still remember when he woke up, the first thing he did was ask us to find him a therapist. He said he had to live, to wait for Lily to come back. Even thinking about it now makes my heart ache. Having a mother like that, Paul's had it rough. But thank God everything's okay now. Hey, the elevator's here. Their voices disappeared down the hallway. I leaned against the door, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle my sobs. Paul, he has depression. In a flash, I remembered the scene of him cutting his wrist in the study. That wasn't some doctor's order to bleed regularly, that was him, in the throes of a depressive episode, trying to kill himself. The realization shattered my heart. Why are you crying out here? Are you not feeling well? Paul, so drunk he was stumbling, came out of the room. Seeing me crying, he sobered up instantly. He scrambled over to me, nervously placing his hand on my forehead. No, I shook my head, wiping away my tears. I took his hand from my forehead, rolled up his sleeve, and revealed the crisscrossing scars. Don't look, Paul instinctively tried to pull his hand back and cover it. But I held on tight. I bent down and kissed those scars, my tears falling onto them with each kiss. Don't hurt yourself anymore. Whatever it is, we'll face it together, I said, using all my strength to keep my voice steady and clear. Paul, I love you. I love you so, so much. Hearing my words, Paul's eyes instantly reddened. He pulled me into his arms, tightening his grip as if to merge me into his very bones. He nodded forcefully in agreement, his voice choked with emotion. Honey, thank you for loving me. Thank you for coming into my world and saving me.